Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. Thank you very much for spending some time with us this afternoon. I know that there are a lot of distractions externally that could have kept you away from our session this evening. So I'm very glad that you were able to join us. This evening, I'm going to be having a quick discussion with you. And I said a discussion, this is just a presentation because we decided to split the presentation in half so that we can have some of the questions midway after we've dealt with some of the issues that will be raised. And we will have the rest of the questions, comments, ideas at the end of the presentation. So I'll just go straight into it. First and foremost, who am I? Because the question that we always ask, whether overtly or covertly, when we're listening to anybody is, why should I listen to this person? And one of the things that I tend to say at certain points is that the B side of my resume actually taught me a lot more than the A side. The side that no one usually highlights, the failures, the issues that come up from time to time, the lessons that we're supposed to learn but haven't learned, etc. And I think that one of the ways that I have helped other people in the past is sharing stuff that people are usually embarrassed to share. So I tend to embarrass myself this afternoon by sharing as much of my failure as possible. Okay. Hello? I would encourage everyone to mute their mics initially so that we would distract during the presentation. As we reach the question and answer period, then you can use the raise hand icon to indicate that you have a question or a suggestion or an answer or an idea that you'd like to share. Okay, thank you. So go straight into it. In terms of our session this afternoon, we're going to split the discussion into the internal factors, and I like to call that hands on the wheel. Basically, what are the things that we have control over directly? Then we're going to have some question and answers, some question and comments. Then we're going to look at some of the external factors that lead to what we normally consider failure, and see what are the things that we can do to spot them in advance. What are the things that we can do to learn from them and actually get stronger as we encounter them. And this is not, I'm making a conscious effort to only share the things that I have personal experience with. I have read a lot, but I haven't tested everything that I've read. So everything that you'll get here this afternoon are things that I have tested in my own life. So let's get real right off the bat. One of the things that I see a lot of being shared over social media in particular are quotes. There's no such thing as failure. Failure is only feedback. Failure is not an option. And as somebody that has trained persons for quite a few years actually, and been a manager since I was 26 years old, I'm now 43 years old, so that's quite a while. One of the things that I keep seeing over and over are people that are very eager to avoid any form of failure and people that are very eager to get past any supposed failure as quickly as possible, right? Just to give you a quick background, I do not come from a rich background by any means at all, by any definition. I am dyslexic, something I discovered quite late in life, actually. I just knew that my brain worked differently to others, and things that were easy to other people came very difficult to me. And therefore, I kept trying to find ways around the issues that I encountered. One of the things that I've said many times is, I will not pass this way again in terms of particular failures, right? So the first thing I'd like to touch on this afternoon is one of the reasons we have so many quotes about failures, and they're very short and they're very neat, is the fact that people are aware that the general public doesn't have a very long a very long attention span. So therefore, there is a high inclination to summarize the lives of people that we admire. So when I read sometimes the summary of the biographies written by famous people, the summary skips entirely over all the failures. So someone started a job, and within 10 years, they became the CEO. And after that, they own the company and they started two other companies, and they skip over all the failures that actually led to the success. Therefore, it's very important for us to understand that there is such a thing as failure, and we need to kind of dig into what it feels like. Because if you are not aware of what it actually feels in the belly of the beast, as I say, when it actually happens to you, what naturally occurs to you is the fact that you are a failure. What doesn't occur to you is the fact that it doesn't occur to you that you have failed at this particular area for a specific reason. You start to see yourself as a failure, and as you will see as I go along, failure is not a linear thing, just like success. There is a cycle that takes you to a failed position. All right. Sorry, we have a bit of a delay on changing slides. Okay. So failure. The definition for failure, basically, there are two ends, basically. One is the lack of success, very simple, and we're keeping it very simple for a reason. The other is the neglect or omission of expected or required action. It's very important because both will become very important as we go along. One is specifically the lack of success, and the other is the neglect or omission of expected or required action. Very important. So failure, very simply, not hitting the target. One of the things that I see a lot dealing with folks that are drug addicts, folks that just came out of prison, because those are two subsets of the community that I do coaching for quite often. And one of the issues that we see quite often is people not having a target, having no target is step one to any kind of failure. If failure is not hitting the target, some folks try to short circuit the system by not having a target at all, right? There are many fancy words for it now, an attachment to outcome. There's a lot of explanations as to why this is somehow a greater way to live your life. But what ends up happening eventually is you reach a point and you're not sure where you were trying to go, but you just have an idea that this is not where you want it to be. And that's when we see people later in life as well go through midlife crises, etc. You see very successful people, quote unquote, very unhappy because they didn't know where they wanted to go. They just know that they didn't arrive where they at a place where they're happy, right? Another issue with respect to having targets is sometimes people have targets that are too specific. And what I mean by that, especially for type A personalities such as us, I assume there are a lot of type A personalities in the room, folks that are fairly successful at academics, etc. We get very specific with respect to the things that we believe will make us happy later in life. And if we don't hit those exact targets, we may not be looking around to see that all the stuff that we actually do have. So again, at the end of the day, I believe that what we all want to some extent is to be happy. Our success is linked to our happiness. There are a lot of people that wind up with all the definition, all the trappings of success and still are not happy, right? So having a fuzzy or far off target is also a major issue that I see we encounter. And let me explain. Every type of motivation, every specific motivator in our lives can be classified in two simple boxes. One are the motivators that help us get away from something we are trying to avoid. So I may go to the gym because I'm trying to avoid getting high blood pressure. I'm trying to avoid getting heart disease. I'm trying not to die young. Or I might go to the gym because I want a six pack, because I want to attract somebody. All of the things in life that motivate us actually push us away. We are trying to avoid something negative, or we're trying to run towards something positive. That's very important because a lot of people, they stall midway. And they stall midway because they lose clarity on what actually is motivating them. And some think that they are not supposed to have control over what motivates them. Motivation is all external to them. This is a major issue as well, right? And also, one of the problems with respect to our targeters, having only a target with no clear path towards that target. Nothing is more frustrating in life than having an idea that we're supposed to be doing more or being more, but not having a clear guide towards that, right? And one of the last point with respect to having a target and its connection to failure is not adjusting our bow. I was speaking to a young person recently that idolized Kobe Bryant, and the person mentioned that Kobe would shoot 400 shots every morning as part of his practice. But what the person didn't mention at all was the fact that Kobe Bryant was adjusting. After every shot, he would adjust, right? He would look and see, am I getting closer to target? And we have a very high level of narcissism today, especially in the young persons, the young people that I see sometimes when we have to do training, it's an issue. And people don't realize that they're being narcissistic because the society has become one to some extent where everyone tells you all you get is positive feedback. All you seem to get from society now to some extent is encouragement regardless of the quality of what your output looks like. That is a problem. It mightn't seem like a problem, but it actually is, because many people don't know that they have to grow, that some of the issues that they face repeatedly are not a feature of their personality, but a function of their lack of development in some areas. So looking at whether we actually are hitting our targets and adjusting to suit is a key area as well as we go forward. Right? So one of the core principles that I want to touch on this evening is the principle of anti-fragile. Now, I would like to, I mentioned at the bottom here, an egg, a rock, and a half empty bottle of soda walked into a bar. Now, I'm using those three things, an egg, a rock, and a half empty bottle of soda, to explain the concept of being anti-fragile. Now, this particular concept is what makes the study of failure something that is useful for us. I want you to imagine for a moment that you have to ship three things, right? One is an egg, which is very fragile, obviously, right? You go to FedEx, you put it in the box, etc. You have to package it a particular way. As it gets roughed up in the shipping process, is likely to break. One is a rock, right, which is not fragile at all. It's actually pretty tough. As it gets roughed up, it doesn't change very much, right? So adversity doesn't impact it very much. And the third is a half empty bottle of soda. And I want you to think about it. An uncovered half empty bottle of soda, you squeeze it, and it's very easy for you to squeeze. You cover it, you shake it up, and it gets tougher the more you shake it up. And to me, that analogy is usually effective in getting someone to really understand what we're talking about in terms of anti-fragility, in terms of becoming anti-fragile. What it basically means is that your level of competence and your level of confidence from each encounter with failure actually increases. So your competence and your confidence increases with your interaction with failure. But you have to do it. You have to undertake this interaction with a particular mindset, and there are particular tools and tips and tricks that I found are pretty useful in encountering failure in the proper manner. So that's the concept of being anti-fragile. We'll come back to that in a little bit. That's very important. Okay, so we looked at the definition of failure a few minutes ago, but I'd like to go into what I call the depths of failure then, in the belly of the beast, right? So some of the things that clearly come up, some of the common feature of failure, of being in a state of failure, is the fact that motivation tends to abandon you. At the time when you need it the most, your motivation simply isn't there. You don't feel to do anything that you should do. So failure is not foolishness, and that's very important, right? failure is not foolishness. Failure is not the lack of knowledge of what we should do, right? It's very infrequent, I think, that real failure comes from a lack of knowledge, right? Sometimes we see clearly what the next steps are, but the motivation simply isn't there, right? And the motivation isn't there mainly because your mind is confused and you're tired all the time. So it's important for us to understand that this isn't just us. This isn't a state of weakness on our part, right? This is what it feels like, right? And one of the things that I believe I've seen a lot is the fact that real failure, the real feeling of failure, comes about when we fail other people. I, on several occasions, have lost money on investments, right? Several is modest. I've lost money on investments many times. The times when I've lost money for other people have always been horrible. And that feeling didn't go away until I helped them to make that money back. And it's important to keep that clear, because anytime we come to a point where we don't feel anything about failing others, that is not a positive step that we want to move towards. Let me explain. One of the things that I see and when I read a lot is the advice of others that it's a superpower not to care what anybody thinks about our actions and our success, the things that we create in the world, right? So it's a superpower to not care, to not give a damn. And that's a major problem. We're not really built up that way as human beings. We're built to be part of a society. As part of a society, what the general members of the society think about our actions is pretty important, because that's what allows them to stay within the society, right? That's what allows us to know if we're actually headed towards doing something that is constructive and helpful to the society, or going towards something that is not, right? So I want us to be very careful about that kind of advice in terms of not caring. I myself I went down that rabbit hole for quite a few years, where I, at one point in time, at the age of 27, I believe, was given the responsibility for all the export markets for one of the larger manufacturing groups in the region. And the pressure of that was so much that I felt it had to be a weakness in myself. Somebody at this level, who is supposed to be at this level, would not feel this level of pressure, would not be failing to make themselves happy every day, would not be failing to hit targets, would not be failing to do different things. And without having that discussion with anybody about what I was feeling, I internalized a lot of that. I caused a lot more pain and had a lot less success in some ways than I could have. So I think it's very important to understand that this particular feeling is not just us, right? That's just naturally the one of the states of failure. So as I mentioned before, failure is neither failure nor success are linear, right? We don't go from one step. It's not a summarized biography of a famous person. You don't go from one step of success to another step of success to another. That's just not the way it works, right? If you are seeing this slide I have here, it's a what I call a negative spiral. So we start at the top. In this case, we get a result that we don't desire or expect, right? We fail to hit the target. We see this as a failure. We identify it as a failure in ourselves. We overthink and procrastinate, right? So it starts to affect our action. Faith in ourselves. We attempt smaller challenges over time. We don't fully commit. Now, this point about not fully committing is important, because one of the character traits that I've seen for successful people over the years is the trait of positivity. And it sounds very corny. It sounds very much like my card. You need to be positive, but there's a hard business reason that I've seen over the years in terms of the importance of positivity. People who are negative quit a lot earlier than people who are positive. And that's a very simple, almost simplistic statement to make, right? Clearly, people who are negative quit. No, but people who are negative, they hide their negativity in different ways. They are overly critical of the steps towards success. They are overly critical of the process. They're overly critical of their tools, of their colleagues. They're overly critical of their deadlines, but they quit long before other people quit. And sometimes in the last 5 minutes of the race, or the last 5 meters of the race, that's when all the success comes, right? So I think it's very important for us to understand that one of the ways that we fail very early on is not fully committing, because we don't want to seem as if we actually are chasing a particular goal. So if we fail to achieve that goal, we still look intelligent because we really weren't committed to that goal to begin with. And I see it very much in older people. When you see it in young people, it's very sad. But I see it very much in older heads, and it's something we need to be very careful about, right? And after we fail to fully commit, we start to settle for a lower comfort zone, right? So one of the areas of failure that I've had in the past, which I don't speak very often about, is the fact that at one point in time, I found myself addicted to sleeping pills, etc. Right? I'm an insomniac, and it was very amazing to me reading a lot about addiction, how to overcome addiction, the causes of addiction, etc. Because I realized I had a major issue. And in reading about addiction, etc., one of the things that I realized, having to interact with other addicts and that kind of stuff, is the fact that people would find themselves settling for smaller and smaller prizes. So I actually spoke to a guy that said, I'm living in my car, but at least I have a car. A lot of people don't have a car. You would have a guy talk about the fact that I'm living on the streets, but at least I'm still around. A lot of people that I know, they're not around to see and it sounds very positive. It sounds like, at least he's keeping a positive attitude. But what he's basically doing is you're actually fitting yourself into a smaller and smaller box and getting comfortable in a smaller and smaller box. Mentally, that's a very dangerous path for us to take in terms of our interaction with failure. It shouldn't force us into a smaller box. And anytime we find ourselves settling like that, that's when it's supposed to pull a lever to remind us, hey, let's keep thinking big. It's very important. I'm just touching on some of these, and we'll have to share it after, because one of the things that I realized in having discussions with folks is the fact that we don't get to go into detail with respect to every branch of the discussion. But I like to share things as well, because it gives you the freedom, obviously, to do some further research, and if something in particular connects with you, you can go ahead, right? But I'm just touching on some of these issues. One of the major problems with respect to facing failure, and one of the things that keep us trapped, is the difference between regret and shame. Now, regret is the fact that we wish things had turned out differently, and we will do what we can to make sure it turn out differently in the future. So if I lost your money, I will have regret about the fact that I lost your money. I'm not going to come to you and say, oh, well, boy, failure is just a part of life. You lost $1,000. We'll try again tomorrow or next week. I'll need another $1,000 from you. That's not the way it works. If you want to go into business, if you want to be trusted as somebody in a supervisory position or a management position, when things go wrong, people want to know that you recognize that things went wrong, that you take responsibility for making sure that in the future things go right. Shame is a different thing to regret. Shame is putting everything on your personality, putting everything on yourself, in the sense of, I cannot do anything right. Anytime we find ourselves in that circle of negativity, that's when shame comes in. Shame is what helps us, what creates problems related to addiction. Shame creates problems related to depression, etc. And those are the spirals that people get locked in, right? So I wouldn't touch on forgiveness and anger, etc., right? But I'll allow you guys to look at that later on. Managing yourself. I always felt that meditation, etc., was something for rich people. It was a very airy, fairy thing. One of the things that I've learned over the years, the fact that until you can manage your mind, until you can quiet your mind, then everything you encounter will control you. Literally everything. Any meditation practice that you research would give you one central tenet, and that tenet is to try to pull your mind to one point whether you listen to music, whether you chant particular words, whether you focus on different parts of your body and relaxing those parts of your body as you sit, whether you imagine a particular point of light, whatever you want to do, right? Being able to pull your mind to one place when failure is upon you and your mind is being pulled in many different directions is step one of getting out of failure and actually building upon it. That is simply step one. The fact that we do not feel to do the things that we're supposed to do at that point, eating and sleeping, etc., is something that I learned the hard way over the years. It took me a very long time to realize that when I don't feel to eat and I don't feel to sleep, are the points when I need to. One of the thoughts that come into my mind a lot when I think back was the thought that I don't deserve sleep at this point in time. I'm supposed to be working. I saw a clip recently of Steve Harvey saying that rich people don't sleep 8 hours, rich people sleep 4 hours, you don't earn the sleep, etc. That's a dangerous position to take. That's a very dangerous position to take. Take it from an insomniac. That is not helpful. The quality of your decisions diminish significantly when you don't take care of yourself, right? You need to see yourself as a tool, as a mechanism that is a decision, you're a decision-making tool, right? The quality of your decisions fail when you don't take care of that tool. It's very important, right? So we spoke just a few minutes ago about the negative spiral, and I want to touch on the positive spiral that we need to keep looking out for. And we need to know that when failure is upon us in serious ways, we won't find ourselves in the spiral automatically. This has to be something that is very conscious. And there are specific elements of it that I want to touch on that I hope are useful. The first, if we start at the bottom, is forget fault and take full responsibility. Fault is not responsibility, right? Fault is the past. Fault is trying to lay blame on yourself or other people, while responsibility is taking upon yourself the goal of creating something different going forward, right? As a manager and as somebody that has managed managers, I have no interest whatsoever in faults. I have no interest in you beating up yourself and going on and on about the problem, and that is of no interest to me whatsoever. What I'm interested in is whether you take responsibility for having a different outcome going forward, right? The faster you can move from fault to responsibility when there is a problem, is the faster you can bounce back. And I see it all the time. Resilience is the personality trait that was most common in successful executives in the United States in a bit of research that was done over the last 5 years. I remember reading about it in an executive magazine. And I'm not surprised by that fact at all. And in my mind, resilience is that difference between fault and responsibility, that quick bounce back. Okay, so we go from that into what's the one thing, right? If we imagine being in a state of failure where things are not going the way that we would like them to go, we can imagine this, we can visualize this as a row of dominoes where one domino hits another one, so you lose your job and therefore you have no money and therefore you can't fix your car and therefore you can't pay your house mortgage and therefore your girlfriend leaves you, just kidding, and therefore you can buy a medication, etc., etc. It would actually be nice things were laid out as neatly as that. One thing just leading to another thing, leading to another thing. But that's not the way it happens. It looks more like a ball of string, different colored string. And it's very unclear sometimes which string we need to pull on, right? So I think always one of the places that I start is, what's the one thing? What's the big thing that I want to do today that when I go and sleep tonight, I will feel good having achieved that, right? That's very important, right? Then we come up with a very simple plan. The plan has to be simple to the point of almost being simplistic. There is no way that you are in a state of confusion, you're in a state of frustration, you're losing faith in yourself, and you're going to execute a complicated plan, right? Then we review that plan, meaning we keep looking over that plan, we refine it, and we recommit. So we actually get some emotional connection to the plan, right? So we have this plan listed out. We're going to do this today. By the end of this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I commit to that plan by seeing myself in the future in that particular, having achieved that particular success, right? Starting now, very straightforward, obviously. And this is a point that is missed by a lot of people. Communicate to relevant persons, right? Seeking space and support. When it's very easy for us to sit here and talk about how we get out of being in a state of failure, because it seems very academic. When you're actually in it, what is happening? People are depending on you. People are calling you. People want to know, where's my money? People want to know, can you help me with this? They still need help, right? And one of the things that we tend to do is pull away, especially men. I've noticed that in male managers in particular, right? They're more prone to it actually, to pull away, to not communicate when they're going through they're going through a difficult situation, which makes things worse because everybody starts to believe. The easiest way to think about it is if we owe money to several persons and we are not communicating any of those persons, everybody's clamoring because they believe that they will be the one that you will not pay. So they want their money, they want it in full, they want it now, right? If we take the initiative and we contact persons and we say, look, this is a situation that I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's going to be way easier than leaving the unknowns out there. And one of the final steps with success, leading to success, is the issue of staying the course. You know, as we on a particular course, we start to actually see benefits. Sometimes that benefit leads us to believe that we are actually further along than we and we see it a lot in people attempting to lose weight, people starting the gym, etc. You lose 2 pounds and start to get the impression that we're totally out of the woods, and we started get the joy of final success or long-term success and the feeling of long-term success without actually achieving what we wanted or what we set out to do in the beginning. So one of the things that I do every morning is review some of my long-term goals. I don't review all of them. I have only a few, but it's very important because it's astoundingly easy to get busy on a lot of projects that will not, and a lot of activities that will not lead you to your final goal. It's astoundingly easy. Busyness is not business, right? And the best form of procrastination is to be totally busy doing something that is not the most important thing you should be working on. Procrastination is not sitting down and just twiddling your thumbs. Procrastination, real good procrastinators such as myself, have to overcome the inclination to be very busy, right? So as I mentioned before, and I'll just touch on this for a couple of seconds, taking action is the key step to getting out of any form of any type of failure we find ourselves in. And sometimes when I make this point to people that have been traditionally successful, people, students, etc., they want to know, what are you talking about? Of course I take action, right? Clearly, because this is why I'm in front of you. This is why I'm your mentee. This is why I'm a supervisor in your company. This is why I am a business person, etc., right? Because I take action consistently. Remember, one of the first things that fail us in when we really hit with failure is that tendency towards taking action, right? I spoke before about finding a quiet place, etc. There's also a rule which I found to be very successful called the second rule, which is pretty straightforward, obviously. When you know you have to do something, you don't allow the coward side of your mind to some extent to talk you out of it. So within 5 seconds of making the decision, you take one major form of action towards making a change, right? Prepping the night before is very key to me as well, has been very key in terms of overcoming procrastination, in terms of dealing with the most important and sometimes the most onerous issues that you have to face. I have these 2 words that I created called gymmingling and swimmingling, and the words came up because one of the things that I realized as well, and this was from going to the gym and actually going to a swim class, was the fact that Some people would be in the gym for years and show no significant improvement. Some people would be in the swim class and I would see them showing no improvement. I'm wondering why. How could you be here for 2 years or etc. consistently coming to every class but not showing improvement? And one of the things that is very clear is the fact that sometimes people think that the price they need to pay is just showing up, right? So you know people like that. They come to class, they sit, they're just showing up, or they're on their phone. So they're not learning, you might as well not be there. Right? So some people want points for actually just attendance. And we see it in all areas of life. It doesn't end in a university setting, it doesn't end in a secondary school setting. It 100% exists in a professional environment, right? And it's something that we need to really be very cautious of. On the next slide, I'll deal with something called the Pomodoro technique. And it's a technique that I discovered several years ago, and it's helped me quite a lot in staying focused at times when I feel under a mountain of pressure, right? So I'll touch on that on the next slide. Here I mentioned, be a good general. And being a good general means planning realistically, making a plan. Before I mentioned having a very simple plan. You need to make a plan with the action in mind. Having a fancy plan and submitting it to someone means absolutely nothing if at the end of the day, you really don't go through with that plan. So having a very simple plan is key. And then be a good soldier. If you have decided on your plan, you've decided on your next your course of action, then simply take action. We cannot take effective action if all through our action we are just double guessing, we are overthinking the plan and we are double guessing ourselves, right? So I have a point here where I say don't drive with your handbrakes up, and that's the idea of going all through the day and every minute of every day that we're taking this action, we are not taking consistent action because we're not sitting about the plan, So set aside time to think specifically on what your next course of action is. Whether that time is in the morning, whether that time is in the evening at the end of the day, whether that time is on a Saturday morning, which was very effective for me as well. But during those times, you're not taking action. You're sitting, you're the general, right? When you decide to act, just act, right? So the Pomodoro technique, and I'll share this session obviously with you guys so you can take a look at it and you could do some further study on it. The Pomodoro technique, basically, it's a very simple thing, right? So you decide on the task, you set a timer for about 25 minutes, right? You work on that task until the timer rings. It's important for you to set the timer because you don't want to keep glancing at your watch, glancing at your phone, etc. You take a short break and you actually go back. So when I work on a project when I'm working on a particular project and I block 2 hours of time to work on a particular project, a report, for example, I don't work 2 hours straight. I actually set it up and break it out into the Pomodoro. Now, it's important for another reason, just to focus for that 25-minute period or whatever. It's very important because during that 25-minute period, I have the ringer off on my phone. So 25 minutes is the longest period within which somebody can contact me. At the end of that 25-minute period, I contact folks, etc. After a while, what starts to happen is that people get accustomed to your cycles and people allow you the time because they know it's only for a few minutes, right? This has been very effective for me. And I would really encourage you to read up a lot on it. Well, not read up a lot, it's very simple, but I encourage you to try it. I'd really encourage you to try it, right? I want to touch on the point of using technology as a tool and not as a tool, right? I use my phone a lot. In fact, I use it a lot more than most people. I would call myself a very heavy user of my phone, and not just making calls, etc. One of the things that amazes me is the fact that some people try to fight guys with, what you call it, boy, lasers, and they're using a bow and arrow. If you have a bow and arrow, if you have a laser available to you, using a bow and arrow is incredibly foolish. And I want to touch on the fact that, so if I look on this on the slide here, I have Learn Faster, Audible and Kindle, right? And online courses. You have so much stuff available to you now. I travel very often, and in my travels, I see some people sometimes they have 1 book, 2 books with them, and people say they're attached to the actual feel of a book, etc. That's no problem. But you have to make a decision between efficiency and inefficiency at all stages. If you, I talk about thinking clearer, using apps, for example, on your phone to think clearer. One of the ways that we can think clearer is journaling. That's very important. Writing helps us streamline our thoughts, right? Using apps for tracking your money, using apps for relaxation, etc., very effective, etc. But I wanna focus on a particular use here for that have been something that's very useful to me. Using Evernote on my phone for something I call faces and places, right? As somebody that's dyslexic, and I never knew, as I said, I only found out I was dyslexic when I was an adult and I got tested. Remembering names was very horrible, was very hard for me for a very long time. So people would be very embarrassed when I would go to a particular country, for example. I just met somebody and they're in government or they're a senior executive, they own a company, whatever. And the person remembers me, etc. And I know the face, I know that I met the person. I do not remember the name, I don't remember the details, right? And people are very offended by that, obviously, right? One of the things that I started to do was to take notes on my phone related to that particular person. So I would take very simple notes, whether they have a child, whether they're married, where they grew up, etc. And I started to call it faces and places, as you mentioned there, as I mentioned there. And I also started taking notes of the more troublesome customers, as who I call customers rather than talk-tomers. And I found that going back to have a conversation with somebody and remembering main elements of that conversation and elements of their personal life, etc., helped a lot in breaking down a lot of the barriers that people had. I also recommend anybody I speak to start doing professional note taking using Microsoft OneNote. I sit in meetings all the time and I see people using pads, etc. And I know that 2 months from now they cannot find a notepad. They do not know what we spoke about in detail. While I can pull up OneNote on my phone, I can pull it up on my laptop, I can search by topic, date, etc. Right? And well, of course, using technology to motivate yourself. So at this point, I just want to take a couple of questions. If you guys have any questions with respect to the first part of the presentation, dealing with the internal elements, you can ask questions, raise your hand, however you wanna do it.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi.
Well, as people decide to ask questions, and I just want to thank you on behalf of my office, Alumni Relations, IAD, and YoPro for taking the time to join us this evening. As you know, we are all facing difficulties now, so I think your topic is very, very appropriate for this time with COVID-19 being in the world. And
Right.
I liked how you focused or advised us that we should always have a specific target and set a clear path to achieve our goals. So I think everybody is enjoying the session. I just wanted to remind persons that they can use the chat to ask questions and they can raise their hand as well. Okay, so over to you guys.
So do we have any questions? Seeing.
Looks like Albertha has a question.
Okay, Alberta, you can go ahead. Hello, Alberta? Alberta, I'm seeing your hand up and down, up and down. I'm not sure if you're hitting it by accident.
If you're having trouble with the technology, Albertha, perhaps you can write your question in the chat and we can come back to it.
Sure. Okay, well, we'll take the question at the end then. I'll do it, right? So we'll just take the question at the end because I don't want to run too long. So one of the things that I want to touch on is the fact that we focused before on the internal elements, right, of facing failure and facing it with the right attitude and actually using particular techniques, etc., to minimize the impact of it first and foremost, and then to try to use it in an anti-fragile way to strengthen ourselves. So as we are faced with a particular issue, we start to become more confident because we know of the failures in the past that we've overcome and actually got stronger because of, and our competence in this. So therefore, the manner in which we communicate to people when we actually in a feeling that we're in a situation where we're failing, and the manner in which we manage ourselves emotionally, etc., improves, right? So your confidence and your competence improves. But there are external conditions that I see people running into all the time, and I wanted to kind of raise them because there are a lot of areas of failure that we don't have to encounter to begin with, right? And there are three main areas I want to focus on. One called new levels, new devils, right? Where I kind of highlight confidence is a skill, not a personality trait. I hear people say it all the time, well, you know, I'm not a very confident person. You have to practice. It literally is something you need to practice, right? Anybody that tells you confident isn't something you need to practice or that you can practice, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Very straightforward. Access to excess. And this particular point is related to the fact that I keep seeing over and over as well, people that get fantastic opportunities, people that actually seem to be becoming more successful, they have more money available, more time, and they crash and burn. And I couldn't understand why. I saw it in myself. I saw that, I saw that recurring feature in some of the things that I was doing, and I saw it in a lot of people around me, right? And the process to progress, I think, is important for us to touch on as well, right? So I'll go into these. So where and when is failure most likely? So I talk here about new levels and new devils, right? One of the things that we need to be aware of, one of the things that I would urge everybody to remember is the fact that every new level, every new stage of life doesn't have to be a complete mystery to us. Over and over, I see young people in particular finding themselves in situations where some of the problems that they're facing are very, very predictable, right? I see people come for interviews all the time. I've interviewed people that came for jobs without having a clear idea of what that job actually involves. Now, our fathers and our grandfathers had the excuse of not knowing what a particular job involved. All we need to do is Google. We need to Google the specific job functions. We need to Google what is a day in the life of X, Y, Z, something as simple as that people fail to actually do, right? And I see it all the time. So at the point of going to a new level, that's something we need to be very, very aware of, right? We need to be very careful. Access to excess. As we come through different stages in life, we actually go to from a stage of having less control over our own decisions, actually. So a child, secondary school, university, yeah, you have your own job, you set up your own company, etc. So we go through these stages of increasing freedom, hopefully, and increasing access to resources. What happens, I have seen over and over, is the fact that the mistakes we make at the small level. So when we're driving a very small vehicle, right, a very slow vehicle and a very weak vehicle, a very small vehicle, the mistakes we make at that level, at the lower level, when we don't have a lot of resources and time, etc., the results are small. The results get bigger when you are now the CEO of the company, right? At one point in time, I was the CEO of a state enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago, and it hit me one day that the decisions that I had to make would impact on quite a number of companies, right? And just that realization, and it was kind of crazy that it's something I had to realize, right? Just that realization in that moment made me understand quite clearly that that's the reason why some people fail. Because the mistakes, if you haven't practiced making, if you haven't practiced the art of decision making, when there are very small, when there are very small potential problems, when you get more authority, obviously, the stress of making decisions without that particular skill is enough to derail you. One of the things I want to touch on as well is the process to progress, right? And I'm going to go into this a little. The process to progress involves a certain level of repetition. If we think of it as a video game, as we're going through life with a video game, some people, they stay in a particular spot and they go through the repetition too long. So they stay on stage 2, for example. So they become a master at stage 2. And you see it in life sometimes. You can encounter people like that. So you become a master at stage 2. You stay and you repeat too long. But some people, they try to jump past these stages and they don't develop the strength necessary to go effectively to the other stage. So people can shortcut the system, and you see it all the time. People come to a position of authority sometimes with developing the skills necessary to do a good job in that position. And they position sometimes because they might be slick, they might have good marketing, etc., but not necessarily not necessarily the ability to make strong decisions. So the point here is, don't curse the weights, right? When you're in at a particular level, you need to be looking around to see what is it that you actually must be lifting in order to get stronger. People talk a lot about paying your dues. So pay your dues, but just move on. There are many times in my career where I have been, most times actually, been the youngest manager in the room. And the way that I've done that over the years, the fact that I look and say, okay, what are the dues that I'm supposed to be paying here? What are the lessons I'm supposed to be learning here? What are the strengths I'm supposed to be developing here? You put yourself in a clear track to learn these things. You volunteer for projects, etc. You learn what you need to, and then you just move forward, right? If you don't have a conscious plan to actually do that, then that's what keeps people stuck at a particular stage, and then they consider themselves failed when they found that they've wasted too much time at a particular stage in their lives. This is a particular this particular issue of staying stuck at a particular stage comes, I have found, when there is the meeting of experience and energy. And I'll show some slides to kind of explain what I'm talking about, right? One of the things that we see in a lot of movies and it's really a good explanation for life, is the fact that there is a level of success that can only be achieved when experience meets energy, when the older head meets the younger head, and the experience actually can inform the energy. If the experience doesn't meet energy, then you have propulsion without direction. That's your wasting time, right? In every scenario, we keep saying it over and over: energy and experience, right? Energy and energy. So the question then is, because then someone could always ask the question, why doesn't Gandalf or Morpheus or Yoda and do what they're encouraging Neo or Luke Skywalker to do? Because they don't have the energy. They've learned they have all the experience. They've gathered, all guys like myself, they've gathered all this experience, but then they don't have the energy to actually execute it, right? How do we put those two things together? And the biggest way that I've found, the most effective way I've found for young people, is to actually develop mentors, to find and develop relationships with mentors. What a mentor will tell you, now a mentor cannot give you all the answers, and I'll show some slides as to why, right? But what a mentor can do, a mentor can save you years of walking around trying to find the answers. They can't give you the answers for your life, but what they can help you with is give you some likely scenarios and give you some, point out some potential traps, right? So one of the things I'm touching on here is the reason mentors cannot give you all the answers is the fact that the advice that somebody like myself or anybody would give is always partially autobiographical. I would be giving advice to you based on my particular life and the circumstances that I have come through. And there will be some lessons in there that hopefully can be useful. But I am actually talking about the past, right? The world that you live in now and the world that you have to succeed in is a world that is fundamentally different and will be fundamentally different than it was even 10 years ago, right? And one of the key reasons for that is the fact that everything is highly connected in the world that you're living in, and technology is driving everything, which means that fundamental changes take place more often, they take place faster, and they take place on a more wide sweeping range. This issue with respect to COVID-19, for example, is not an isolated scenario, right? We see it in all other areas of life, but it's a very good analogy for what is happening with multiple areas, right? The reason it spreads so fast is because everything is interconnected. It's very easy to jump on a plane and come out of Wuhan, China, and end up in any other part of the world. It's very easy to spread a disease when we're all packed into tight living conditions and close in terms of offices and internal, central AC, etc. Right? So this same phenomenon means that it's very difficult for you to keep track externally of all the changes taking place. Right? So what does that mean then for the way that you try to avoid failure and then try to use it to build yourself? You have to be aware that there are a billion opinions. Everyone has an opinion, right? There's a lack of respect for expertise, and you will see it as you come out into the world of work, or as you advance. There is that lack of respect for expertise is not just from the bottom in terms of some people that don't have expertise, but even in terms of entrepreneurs. I have found that a lot of very successful entrepreneurs don't respect technical people that work for them, and you have to be aware of that so you don't take it personal, right? There's a lot of noise. People on YouTube, Instagram, etc., they're more focused on content creation and putting out a video or some piece of content every day or every week, etc., than digging into the real crux of some of the things that they're sharing, right? And my grandfather always said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Someone doesn't have to have bad intentions in mind for you in order to share information that could actually create a lot of problems. And we see it now. The amount of wrong information I've seen for COVID-19 is quite amazing, right? So how do you kind of decide how you sift through some of the information that's coming your way? This quote is one that I love because it helps to solidify a lot of what I think about all the information is being shared, right? I do not take constructive criticism from people who have never constructed anything. Simple. If they've never done it, if they've never dealt with some of the stuff that they're trying to deal, you don't need to be disrespectful, but know to put it in its place, right? One of the things that you need to be aware of as well, in addition to having a lot of information coming at you, underhanded, nasty businessmen like myself understand that in order to drive action, in order to drive purchase on the part of viewers, customers, etc., I need to impact on their emotion. So you have a lot of information coming, but the information is also emotionally charged, right? So some of the books that I have here, you can take a little look into this particular area, because if you look at get a good idea, a firm idea of how people manipulate you, then it's a lot easier for you to disconnect yourself from that manipulation, right? It's very important. Well, I have found it to be very important, right? And one of the things I want to touch on here is the fact that there is no need for us to be afraid of all the failures that will come at particular points. And it's important, and the importance of it came back to me because I mentioned to someone the discussion for this evening, and the person said that there is a lot that failure can teach you that success can never teach you. And that is absolutely true. One of the things that failure can teach you that success can never teach you is the fact that we all have limitations. And at particular points, that knowledge of just simply having limitations is all we need to keep us growing, right? So I want to take a few questions. Well, I see a lot of questions coming up here. Let me see the order of the questions and I can answer a few. Give me 1 second. Okay, so what are your 2 tips for increasing resilience, bouncing back from failure? Okay, tip 1 for increasing resilience is this, right? And I've learned this the hard way. Tip 1 is to be very clear on what you will feel like when you succeed at your particular goal. Not to be clear on just what it is, not just writing it down, closing your eyes and actually feeling what it will feel like to achieve your particular goal, right? You can only counter a feeling with a feeling, right? And a lack of resilience is the feeling that you can't keep going forward and you cannot achieve what you want in the end. As I mentioned before, motivation is actually running away from something negative or running towards something positive. The brighter you can have that future achievements in your mind, is the easier it is to actually be resilient. And the other thing is to remember the successes that you've had in terms of bouncing back. One of the things that I do, which is very weird, I do a lot of weird stuff, but one of the weird things that I do, I take mementos at particular down periods. So there was a period when I was so broke, I had my first vehicle and I was so broke, and my tires were down to the wire and you would see the treading in the tires or whatever. I made an investment that didn't go well. And I actually took shoe dye, black shoe dye, and put it over the marks in the tires, the tread in the tires, so people wouldn't see that my tires were threadbare. I took a picture of that because it was the lowest I had reached at that point. And over the years, I have some pictures, and it's very important to actually look back, right? In the face of failure, did you ask for help to level up? And if yes, how did you know or decide who to trust to ask for help? Right. So in terms of trust, there are 2 questions that I ask myself in terms of who should I trust? One is connected to the question, to the statement I made before. Do not take constructive criticism from those who haven't constructed anything. So question 1 is, does this person know what they're talking about? Can this person help me? Question 2 is, does this person have my best interest at heart? Will this person help me? If you have one without the other, you have a problem. If you have one without the other, that's like telling a neighbor you have this highly technical problem on your job. They're willing to help you, they can't help you. If you have a highly technical person that can help you, but that person doesn't have the best interest at heart, they could actually do you harm. So it's important though to build that bridge beforehand. Before you need to go to ask questions of people, you build the bridge with them, you build the relationship, right? How do you stop yourself or curb constant overthinking? The way that I help, I have a lot of problems with, I've had a lot of problems with that because like I said, I'm an insomniac, but it's not because I'm an insomniac. I'm an insomniac because I'm a constant overthinker. So one is the parking lot. So a notepad close to your bed, write down the issues that are constantly keeping you up, write down the issues that are on your mind that have you uncomfortable, and write down what you're going to do to overcome those issues. And one of the things that I do a lot as well is write down what is the worst case scenario if I don't take action, which motivates me to take action, but actually writing down what is the worst case scenario, what is the issue, and what is the action I'm going to take, right? So that helps a lot. And meditation helped me a lot as well. It's like building a muscle of focus. That's what meditation does. How can you stay motivated when you're surrounded by negative or critical people? Headphones. I'm only half joking about that. It's very important to develop the ability to say no. It's very important to develop the ability to separate yourself mentally from folks that are around you that might be negative or critical, right? It's important, I have found, to rather than try to ignore negative people around you, it's important to develop a support system. So you develop relationships with positive people, right? And also, I have this thing called my cabinet of advisors. So in the way that someone would say, what would Jesus do, for example? There was a point when I really loved the way that Diddy, right, Sean Combs, would really attack projects he was working on. And I said almost like a joke, like, what would Diddy do? And I started to think in the way that he would normally think about particular projects. So the constant negativity around me was actually giving me a feeling like, oh, well, I'm among the 5% of people that are positive in this negative situation. So I started to feel better about the fact that I was different from those around me, right? Being that confidence is a skill that needs to be developed. What would you say are the most effective tools for improving this? I don't know what would be most effective for you as an individual. And I have to tell you that one of the things that I found giving advice to and why I've kind of adjusted the way I give advice is the fact that because we have different personality types, what will work for you will not work for me. And let me explain to you what I mean, right? So if you can imagine two football players, and one football player is motivated when coach challenges him and the coach says, "There's no way you could do that. I know you're not good enough," etc., etc. And that will motivate one person. Those same words will crush somebody else, right? So one of the tricks I would suggest is look at your actions and look at your feelings as if you are examining a stranger. Have the assumption that you really don't know yourself. You're trying to figure out, okay, so what kind of personality am I? Am I somebody that will be motivated by one thing versus something else? So for example, what thing that motivates me is music. So I drive to work in the morning, and according to the type of meeting I have, I'm listening to Cableton, or I'm listening to Buju, or I'm listening to whatever, right? At one point in time, I felt like I should be listening to something more, socially upscale, I guess. I don't know. I was young and I was foolish. And some of the things that motivated me a lot when I was young, I moved away from that and I lost myself at some time. So I think it's important for us to be clear that you need to customize your go-to music track list. You need to customize your memories of the things that you've achieved in the past, right? So you have your go-to thoughts that you go to and say, okay, these are the things, and this is not airy-fairy stuff. This is stuff if you read up on some of the biggest footballers in the world, etc. This is stuff that these guys do. They call it a circle of success. They remember all the things that they've done in the past, no matter how small, and they build on that, right? And I think that was the last question. Do we have any more questions? Anybody need me to explain anything further in terms of the questions that they asked before?
I think, Adrian, that
Yes?
based on the questions, you can see that this has been a very informative and interesting session. You've really provided us with an amazing amount of information. We've gotten a good feedback, and everybody has now reached their point, and information is so useful. So truly, we have to express our gratitude for taking this time, especially during this period of COVID-19, for being with us. We will be bringing more special sessions to you all around the topic of COVID-19. We invite you to join us in future sessions. But on behalf of YoPro and UWI, we'd really like to thank you, Adrian, for sharing with us this evening. It's really been a truly wonderful session. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Come again soon. We will let you know what the next one is.